So, I played this game yesterday as black. My opponent was a pretty decent player, I think. The time control was 2 minutes with 2 seconds on each move. So let's take a look. E4, C5, knight f3, d6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight f6, knight c3, knight c6, bishop e2, e5, knight b3, bishop e6, bishop e3, bishop e7, castles, a6, f4. This is all book, so I don't really have all that much to comment on these moves. After f4, black stands with basically two choices. You can either castle right away or just take the pawn. I took the pawn because I don't like to castle here and allow white to play something like e5 and start something on the king side. So takes, and knight e5. It's not necessary to play knight e5 immediately. Perhaps castles is equally good. But I play knight to e5, king h1, a useful move because of potential check on b6. A castle, knight d4, knight g6. So we have this tension here between the knight and the bishop on e6, which, well, you know, it benefits white here because I cannot really answer to that tension here except for creating an own attention myself by knight g6. So you're playing the bishop g3, rook c8, knight f5 takes. It's also possible to play d5, which is the most common move here, I think. But he took back, and knight goes back to e5, queen d2. That's how the book move would have been queen d4, but he played queen d2, b5. The rest thing to play something like b4 perhaps. a3, queen c7, rook a to d1, queen c6. Takes, bishop f3, e4. And instead of what he played, bishop e2, perhaps he could have tried this move. Then I can just take back over here. And if he takes, well, it's hard to say who's better here. Perhaps, I don't know. Perhaps it's equal. But he played bishop e2. Rook f2, d8. Queen f4, bishop e6, queen h4, bishop e5. He played h3. I don't quite see the point with that move, to be honest. Bishop takes, pawn takes, queen takes, rook takes d8, rook takes d8, bishop e1. Very passive, boring move, I think. And here I made the decision to take the pawn on a3. It is actually a decision, well, maybe not terribly important, but you know, when you take a pawn on the side of the board, especially in this situation where white could play, you know, g4, g5, and stuff like that. Your queen will be away from the action in the center, and well, it's worth thinking about. But I took the pawn anyway. And he did play g4, I played h6, slowing it down a little bit, but he played g5 anyway. He took back with the queen, and now he loses the pawn on h3, and it's check. He went to g1, and here I play rook c8 because my rook on d8 is not really doing all that much. I don't have any squares, you know. I can't go here, and it's not really doing all that much here on d4. So I'll play rook c8, and my idea is to, well, I could put the pawn, you know, the rook on c3. He played rook f2, rook c3, rook g2. I played queen e3 check, just trading queens because I'm up a couple of pawns anyway, but he didn't take immediately, so I just took his queen. Rook takes, and here I started pushing my pawns. And here I activated my knight on f6. He wasn't really doing all that much. King c1, knight to e3, bishop d1, a2, king b2, rook a3, rook bishop e2, and here I temporarily gave up my knight for a pawn, but when he takes back, I will make a queen with my pawn, so he has to give up his rook. King b3, check. If he goes... Well, it doesn't really matter what he does. For example, if he goes to, let's say, c2, I can just... I don't know. Doesn't really matter what I do. I mean, everything is simple here. I can threaten his bishop, I can go to h1 and then rook h2, you know, very simple. But he didn't do that, so after rook b1 he played king to c4, rook b2, bishop d1, e3, king d3, and now rook d2 check. King takes pawn and rook takes d1, and my opponent resigned. So let's go back to the opening a little bit. This is all very well known opening theory, so I don't know what to say. Let's see if I can find something here. Yeah, maybe after knight f5 I could have tried d5 perhaps. Then, for example, knight takes e7 check, knight takes e7, rook takes f6, g takes, you know, queen d4, d takes e4, queen f6. That is the end of line. Here I will probably play knight g6, and if takes, takes, and this pawn lives on, so he probably wouldn't take. After this move, maybe he would play... Oh, that's a good question actually. Well, okay, maybe we can play this. Takes, takes, up here. 4 pawns against 5. But then there's also this pawn hanging, so he will probably have to play this move. I don't know, probably equal. But you know, all this is just opening theory anyway. He didn't play any of those, so he played pawn takes, knight e5, queen d2. Instead, if he had played queen d4, then queen a5, rook a2 d1, rook f2 d8, rook d2, knight c6, and that's the end of the line. And what's quite obvious is that white is putting more pressure on this pawn, and also threatening to take my knight at some point, you know, have something going on d5. I don't know, but as the game went, my opponent, we both played 16 book moves, and on move 51 he resigned.